It's always a shared journey. Whatever we're doing, this is a shared journey. And so, I mean, and I'll do the advert now, I'm taking a pilgrimage to the Holy Land in December, an Advent pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and you often talk about the leader. I don't lead, I walk alongside, I accompany people as they go on this pilgrimage. And that's the way it's worked, because yes, I might have been some sort of influence in Aaron's journey, but actually we've walked together.
We've had disagreements as well, haven't we, over the years?
Have we?
We've had some great disagreements. Luckily, I can only count them on a couple of fingers.
Right.
But no, we've been great sparring partners, and we've left each other's company and been scratching away thinking, where does that leave me in my faith? You know, and it's made us challenge. I think we've agreed that we've both challenged where God is in our journey. So,
and we've grown with it.
Yeah, we have done. Yeah, we have done.
Yeah.
So this is Doug, everybody. I'm sure that by the end of today, you'll feel we've had a wonderful service. And today we're going to be talking about communion, what communion means. So before we get started, I better introduce the rest of the team. We've got Emma, who's going to be doing our factoids. We've got Ellie, who's in the creche. She's
Kids Club.
Kids Club.
Just the one kid.
Well, it's called Kids Club at the moment, but it will be Kids Club when our children turn up. And we've got Michelle, who is she's a catering manager. So should we stand and sing our first song, shall we? Oh, we better do the health and safety. Don't forget you've got hot drinks in front of you. So be careful while you're jumping up and acting
I know we say
Pentecostal.
that, but we're the most Anglo-Saxon we could ever be. We don't jump on, do we?
Well, we're getting there though, we're getting there. I don't know if you know this song. Let's stand to sing this. This is called Blessed Be Thy Name. Blessed be your name.
Blessed be your name, when streams of abundance flow. Blessed be your name, when I'm found in the desert place, when I walk through the wilderness. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name, Jesus. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. You cannot take away. You cannot take away. My heart will choose to say, blessed be your name.
So, can I welcome Doug to come up? Would you give a big round of applause to Doug? Today. Holy Communion. Do this in remembrance of me. So my first question, Doug, to you is, what is communion? What is communion in a nutshell?
What is communion? It's very simple. It's being together and it's sharing together in food and drink in this instance. And if we put a capital H and a capital C with it, so it's Holy Communion, then what we're talking about very much is bringing ourselves into the presence of remembering what Jesus did for us as he was preparing himself to die for us. And it's remembering that. And what we do is we take the ordinary things of life and we just say, well, look, here are some things which we commonly have, and actually Jesus is in all of those. And as we do things as part of that, we remember some very specific things about who Jesus was and what he did for us.
First of all, is it important to have communion? Because some churches, which are some of them are Christian churches, I think, like the Baptists, they're not really. I don't think they're really big on communion. When we've had ecumenical services, they can. I always think the Baptists can kind of take, or the Methodists can take or leave. How important is taking communion?
I can only go from what Jesus said, was whenever you eat this bread and drink this wine, remember me. I don't know about you, Aaron, I eat an awful lot of bread and I drink an awful lot of wine.
Does it show? There's no need to get personal, though.
Well, it's all right. I'm just only trying to lose it myself.
Are you thinking of Jesus when you're doing that? All that time?
Often. Now, you see, that's an interesting point. Not necessarily all the time. I'm being honest here. I love my food and I love my drink. And actually, it's words like that, it's questions like that, that sometimes bring you up with a full stop. Because you have to suddenly think, hang on, have I left Jesus out? I know there are very lots of people, this is sort of straying a little bit and probably delaying the service, I don't know, but
plenty of time.
There's lots of people, you know, around the world who, when they sit down to eat, have an empty chair at the table. You know, the invisible guest. And that invisible guest is Jesus. And that's a conscious effort by those people to say that Jesus is always with us. Whether we like it or not, we can't avoid that.
Yeah, but not when we're having McDonald's and things like that. You wouldn't turn up at McDonald's, surely, if you're having McDonald's.
Well, you wouldn't just say, look, I'm just having this one, Jesus, honest, I need
Well,
it.
I tell you what, an abiding memory I have is down by the Dallington February Centre, when McDonald's first opened. I very rarely go to McDonald's, but the one time I did, there were 3 nuns having a brilliant time.
That's the beginning of a joke, isn't it?
Shower off and he goes in.
A vicar walks into a pub and there were these three nuns.
You don't even know.
Well, that's about right, yeah. I'm a Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Oh, well, you know. Okay. Should I have a factoid, Emma?
Yes, in the Christian denominations that practice infant baptism, confirmation is seen as a sealing of the covenant created in baptism. Those being confirmed are those of confirmads and adults, for adults, and in affirmation of belief.
So I'm going to have to ask this question because it's something that can shock a lot of people. But when we're about to take communion, we say to eat his flesh and drink his blood. Now that's almost like a bit like The Walking Dead, the series, if you watch the zombie thing. But that is not normal talk, is it? Eating flesh and drinking blood. That's a stark thing to say, isn't it?
I mean, it's a challenge for a lot of people. In fact, in history, Christians were accused of cannibalism. They were literally eating it. Yeah, that's what a number of people thought. We get very complicated here and very theological, so I won't. What I will say is that there are parts of the church where they believe that somehow when you consecrate the bread and the wine, when you break the bread and you consecrate the wine, that somehow it does actually become the body and blood of Christ.
Isn't that the Catholic Church that believe that? Isn't it called, I might have to dig back in now, isn't that called transubstantiation? And
That's what it's called, that's the big name for it.
Is that why Catholics and Anglicans, well, I'm just going to tell you a very brief story. When I went to Northern Ireland to stay with my Catholic friends, and I went to church with them, and they was having communion, and it was strange because they didn't have the wine, and he said it was not full communion today. It's only, they didn't call it half communion, but you only went up and got bread. And Jacqueline, my friend's wife, she was like a cat on a hot tin roof, saying, "Oh, I should go and tell the priest that it is an Anglican." And Andy was saying, "Just sit down, for goodness sake. Just sit down, Jacqueline. It's not fussing." And I said, "Jacqueline, it's not a problem for me. It's not making it a problem." But afterwards, some years later, I found out that I shouldn't have been taking communion in the Catholic Church. In fact, Ellie, are you down there somewhere?
Yeah.
You was a teacher at a Catholic school.
Yeah.
And you wasn't able to take communion at the school with them.
No, not at all. So I had to go for a blessing.
But when Andy Doherty comes to our church, he comes up, goes straight to the altar rail and takes communion, thinks it's absolutely fine and dandy. So, and we've been to New Wine together.
Yeah.
And do you remember the Catholics used to have their communion separately to when we used to go and have communion on a Sunday? Do you remember?
Well, I've been refused communion.
Have you?
Yeah, I went to, do you remember Father Damien?
Yes.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, some of you might know Father. He sounds a bit like Father Damien. He used to be the Catholic priest in Billy, and a great figure in the community, and it was a great sadness when he died. And there was a huge service that went out into the car park, didn't it, at the Catholic Cathedral in town. And the place was absolutely packed, and quite a lot of us from Billing went along to that service. And it was interesting because my wife was allowed to take communion, but because I turned up with my collar on, I was not allowed to take communion. I was told I could go and have a blessing, but I couldn't receive communion.
But isn't it all the same God?
Oh, funny! You know,
That was all I believe.
that's what I'm saying. Jesus.
Yeah.
We do this to Jesus. We make difference. That is the eternal problem, and until we can get
But I
that
think
sorted
that's
out.
our duty. We are the ones who are in a much more open-minded religion. So we are there. We should be the ones responsible to educate everybody to come together, all religions, because we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, you say that about we are open-minded. Well, that I don't want to shoot you down, but I was out on Friday evening and somebody introduced me to somebody. I said, oh, I think you used to be a reader, didn't you? But not anymore, I'm not. I said, oh, okay. Have you retired, have you? And he said, no, my licence taken off of me. And I said, why was that? You've been a reader? He said, I've been a reader since I was 24. And he's now in his late 70s. He said, and I said, why is that? He said, because I don't believe in women priests. Absolutely do not believe in it. He said, it doesn't say anything about it. The 12 disciples were all men. And I was a bit like, even the guy standing next to me was like it was a bit like, I can't believe I knew this would be, and I've heard this before, but it was a bit like, I've never met anyone like that before. And he just said, and the bishop said, then there's no place for you in our church. So that's it, I've gone. And I was absolutely horrified that this is still going on in 2022. And he was so outspoken about it. So you think we're open-minded, but
I think there's a lot of us. I think a lot of the world, and I perhaps make it a bit bigger than that. Then I think a lot of the world are beginning to get more open-minded, and it's about us that are open-minded to educate those people that aren't. And that's what I feel my duty is. You know, to be open-minded and let everybody in, and let everybody grow. It will come to it. It might not be in our lifetime, but.
Do you want to give a fact or did you?
Okay. According to the ancient practice maintained in the Roman liturgy, an adult is not to be baptised unless he receives confirmation immediately afterwards.
No. What is that again, sorry?
That's Roman liturgy. Yeah, Roman liturgy.
Now, I've got a question for you, Doug. The people at this church at Dallington ain't really familiar with this, and I know you bought your own set, but am I right in thinking, that if this is not set up properly, at the altar, let's say you get it back to front, and some of us here have set this up, haven't we, over the years? If this is not set up properly and you get it in the wrong order, how bad is that? Because some people get quite upset, don't they? I've seen this before, they get upset if it's not in the right order, or they haven't got the right thing with the right size. How important is this to get these?
That folding bag is upsetting me at the minute.
Yeah, then I rest my case. Yeah, there you go. So how important is this?
The earth will open and swallow you.
Right, okay.
You should have asked me, Aaron.
I mean, look, I've got a smile on my face, Aaron. Confession time. Should we have confession time?
Don't read the question, because one of the questions a bit later on is, what is the best and worst thing that's happened to you while giving communion? And
all right, I'll say that.
And I'm actually looking at that chalice down there that you've brought, and that actually brought me out in a cold sweat, that did. And I'm going to tell you why later. Right. I'm actually looking at it and thinking, that brings back really bad memories for me, that did. And I'm going to tell you why later on, so...
Can I just say, obviously I have no problem what order that is in. And I had one lady in a congregation used to set up, and she was always worried that she was getting it wrong. And I knew she made lovely chocolate brownies, so I always used to say, well, look, I don't care if I lift it up and find a lovely chocolate brownie under there. As long as everything's vaguely near the altar, I don't mind. It's more valuable that you have the go and you take part than worrying about getting it right. I never did get a chocolate brownie.
So okay, very quick. Who qualifies to take communion? What happens if they've not been confirmed? I mean, does that mean that's
what do you mean to take communion? To lead communion?
No,
to receive it.
To go and receive it. Sorry, to go up and to receive it. I mean, is it the rules that you are confirmed?
There are. I mean, it's a difficult one.
It's the first time I've seen this, but.
What you're saying is people do
I go into a lot of churches these days, and if you put I go into a lot of churches, so I have no idea who's in the congregation. If they come up and put their hands out, they get communion. I occasionally am told by a well-meaning member of the congregation, "Oh, you shouldn't have given communion to so-and-so. They're not confirmed, they're too young, they're this, that and the other." As far as I'm concerned, I don't see anything in the Bible, and Sue, please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see anything in the Bible that bars anybody from receiving communion.
So what's the point of confirmation?
The confirmation is you saying, I am committing myself to living a life in Jesus. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's the public commitment. It's you making your personal statement of faith and commitment. But yeah, like Doug, I'm not asking 20 questions up at the altar if someone puts their hand out.
And what date and when was it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
No.
Again, it's another one of these barriers. To me, my function as a priest is to enable everybody, and including me, to just come fully into the presence of Jesus, to come fully into the presence of God. And if I do anything to prevent that, then I'm the one who's wrong, not you. I'm doing something that isn't allowing you to come into the presence of Jesus in a real way, in an authentic way. And it's all about authenticism. It's all about being real, and so when we talk, I never preach to people or at people, at least I hope I don't. I include myself in the preaching. If I'm talking about things that are going wrong, things that are not going right or whatever, I'm including myself here. I hate these days being up there preaching because you're looking down on people. I never try and...
He's a timer. I have to be up there because I'm vertically challenged here. I'm nearer 5 foot than I am 6 foot. So
Yeah, Sue doesn't.
Sue doesn't.
Aaron
She's like taller than me. But mind you, whenever I'm preaching, she always, I'll come in and the lectern's always up here. So
yeah.
So that's why I always got there. But
yeah, you need a stick.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, do you have a factor? Because I've got one question for you about that.
I've got some quick fire questions. I've been writing them while I've been sat here.
Get ready now, brace yourself.
They're really quick.
Oh, right.
You said you didn't want to do it.
No, but I've got some quick fire questions, so you can't spend longer than 30 seconds answering them. Okay? Can I do it now?
Yes.
Okay. Question number 1. Can you get drunk on the wine?
If you want to.
One sip. If one sip does
No.
seriously.
No.
So it's not alcoholic?
Oh, it is alcoholic, yeah.
It has to be alcoholic.
Of course it
Well,
is.
How do you drive home?
It's a sweet. We're not giving you a bottle.
Yeah, it could be. If you have to empty it.
If there are multiple services that I have to take on a day, I usually am very careful about how much wine there is in the chalice in the last service.
He just looks like Jack Sparrow.
And it will often be watered down.
Oh, okay. Do you have to have the wine first or the bread first, or does it matter?
30 seconds.
That's an interesting thing. I have no idea. Except that this comes out of actually a formal Jewish meal called the Passover. And in the Passover meal, things would have been done in a specific order. I mean, there wasn't just one wafer. There wasn't just one bread. There would have been a number of different wafers that are used at different points in the Passover meal. And in fact, the chalice that Jesus used, or the cup that Jesus used, was one of many, and it was the last cup of the meal. So I suppose, thinking quickly, what it's saying is you have the bread first and you have the wine afterwards.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, why wafer rather than bread?
Well, you've stolen my thunder because that was one of the questions I was
Okay, I've got a different
going to
question then. Can you take the wafer home or the bread home? So sometimes if you're just having the wafer, you might think, oh, it's going to get stuck to the roof of my mouth, so I'm going to go home, get a drink, and then I'll finish it, or I'll have it, or do you have to consume it in a church?
There is a very big debate going on at this very moment in the church as a whole because of remote communion over the airwaves. Can you consecrate somebody else's bread and wine in their living room when you're doing a live service from the church? And I mean, it's a big theological question, and people are really challenged by it. I would say myself that, and this is a personal thing rather than a sort of legal thing, a personal thing is if I've received that bread in the service, I need to consume it while I'm there.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to come down one side or the other on whether you can or can't take it home. I know some people who actually take the bread and then give it to their dog.
Yeah, we didn't know that.
You know, in church.
Oh, really?
In church.
Wow.
And I think, well, we've got a blessed dog.
Bless God.
Yeah, but I mean,
Thank you.
Okay. Has anyone got any questions we'd like to ask Doug?
Isn't communion one of the times when we come closest to God? When we take communion? No?
I hesitate because I don't. I'm finding it difficult to think about how we talk about closest to God. The closest to God that I am is when I find myself flat out on the floor in tears because of something that's happened and had such an impact on me that I can't do anything else.
Can I just?
Yeah, please do.
I don't mean to steal your thunder there, Doug, but I did a master's dissertation on ritual in the Eucharist, and I think the conclusion I came to, it wasn't that we were closest to God, but we were most aware, because ritual is a marking attention, so you do something in a slightly different way to mark out that there's something special going on. You're always close to God. God is never away from you. There are just moments when you're aware of it more, and sometimes that's in crisis, and sometimes that's through the rituals that we do, that we're specifically concentrating. So it's more about our awareness than it is about God's remoteness or closeness. So yeah, if that makes sense, yeah.
Can I add something to that? Because I kind of see it slightly different to what we've spoken about this morning. When I've been away, because we have a narrowboat, we go away for the summer holiday, so I might be away for 4 or 5 weeks. And before, when we was at Lechlade, I went to church, because the church was opposite where we moored up, but it was a non-communion service. So when I got back to my church, I absolutely felt like I was, I can't, it was different. The only way I can describe it is I felt like I was gasping to receive communion. Because quite often for me, communion, when I receive communion, it is hitting the reset button, and it's like, oh, you know, everything that I've said and done and thought and all the things, I feel that that's kind of just, by eating the bread and the wine, the flesh and the blood, it reminds me that my sins have been forgiven. So I always see communion as hitting the reset button. But I'm not sure if that's right or wrong.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely right.
That's how I see it. Absolutely. Because when I've had communion, I kind of feel refreshed. But when we had the wine at St James, or don't want to tell you,
yeah, because
they're still working on that. I actually felt quite overwhelmed. The fact that I'd had a dry January and I had that little bit of wine, I actually felt
and your pain medication, you were away with the fairies after that.
it was only a little tiny. But it was. But I actually found it quite overwhelming that I was receiving a full communion, which we haven't had for nearly two years.
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
So
2 years in March. Yeah.
So, Doug, how easy is it to set up communion? I mean, do you think you could do? I mean, you've brought some stuff and we've got some stuff here, but how easy would it be for us to take communion this morning?
Right. I'll take it back to its very basics.
That's the ones that qualify for it, that is.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I thought we were allowed to do what we like now. That's what Joe said.
Is that okay?
Right.
Do loads of
It's
wine. Do loads of wine. I having a dry
Yeah, Ellie's volunteered to empty the chalice at the end.
We're ready for communion.
Yeah.
We're not already. You haven't got all the gizmo stuff out of the review, so you need loads of stuff out there.
I've got something to keep the bread clean off the table. I've got something to put the wine in. Oh, there is one thing that I should do, and it's very simple, really. I'm just going to do that. We're ready. Oh, I need some wine.
That all seems very simple to me, then, though. That's going to work.
And we also, if I can find it, we also have some water somewhere.
To water it down.
Well, yes and no. There we are, some water. And that's all we need. And these are...
Do you want to take them bits away, these complicated bits? Because we look like it's very complicated, doesn't it?
And there's very practical reasons for a lot of this stuff, and we mystify it. And it's good that it's mystified, because in some respects, what we're doing is we are saying this is very, very important in our lives. But we can sometimes make it too ritualised. And I'm not going to make any comments about different styles that people have in church, because each of them is valid in its own way. For me, the communion is the highlight of the meal. It's the important part of the meal. Everything before it leads up to it. And as Aaron said, it's a sort of restart, re-kicks you back into who you are. But there's practical reasons for this. First of all, the wine. The reason we've got wine is that the water is awful. People, ever since fermentation was discovered, have found that the fermentation kills all the bugs. And so you will find even kids will be drinking wine. Yeah, it's not the sort of 14, 15, 16% proof wine that we have today. It's probably even less proof than beer. But the fact is that this is the sort of standard things that people would drink as part of their meal. Ordinary water is probably much more for washing than it is for drinking.
Can I ask a question? You know, with regards to the wine, what sort of wine is it? Is it a special wine that the church gets in, or is it your supermarket?
Well, do you know, in one of the churches that I was at, the person who supplied the wine was a vintner. He actually imported superior quality wine, and that was his gift to the church. He always supplied the wine. And everybody feared that Sunday, when we ran out of his wine, because you'd go down to Tesco's and get Best Ruby Ridge, and he'd come up and he'd take the wine and said, "You're not using the right wine." He knew straight away. What you bring is, as we all do, we bring the very best of ourselves. For him, it was his best vintage wine. But actually, it's the bread and the wine. And I dread to think what you use here. I know in many churches it literally is Tesco's Best Ruby Ridge. Because people want to have, for some reason, they want to have red wine. I've yet to have red wine when I've been in the Holy Land.
See, Sue gave us a lot. She said fortified wine. She avoided answering that question at last service.
Right, okay, yes, we'll come to that.
My assumption is that it's red wine to represent the colour of Jesus' blood.
And I think that's it. I think that's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Fortified wine.
Because I had the other side sort of in Biker. Our sacristan was a lad who had some learning difficulties, but was on state pension,
yeah.
And he bought the wine, and it was the cheapest sherry you could get from Morrison's, but it was the richest thing that he could bring to the table. So we didn't, you know, that was the best, absolutely the best, because it was of his heart.
Do you remember that story about? That Jesus tells about the Pharisee who comes into the temple and says, "Oh, I'm so glad I'm not like I'm bringing myself. I'm so glad I'm not like that person there." And there's this widow who puts 2 small coins into the collection, And Jesus comments that's the whole of who she is. And what we miss in that is that it's two minds. Because it's not just the last bit of money she has, it's the last and the bit before.
She's given out of what she doesn't have, whereas he's given out of what he doesn't have.
Yeah.
Precisely. So, that's that. Now, just finally, practical. You talked about, does it matter which order you put things in and whether you had a green thing or a red thing or a purple thing, or what? That's all ritual. The reason you have that, like that is, do you have bats in church here?
No, I don't think so.
No, we haven't seen her since lockdown. So. No, it's a female bat that you sometimes see.
No, yeah.
So.
Bat urine and faeces is awful. What about, you've got a wooden roof here. Yeah, I presume it's nice and sealed. A lot of churches, you get all sorts of muck that falls down from the ceiling. Do you want that in the wine that you're going to drink? Do you want bat wee on your bread?
Oh, I was very glad about that the other week when we had that mini tornado go through Northampton, because at St James all sorts of muck came down just as I was consecrating, and I was very pleased it was all covered.
So, it's practical. Absolutely practical. So let's uncover that.
Check to see if there's any battery in there.
I've drunk from this and it's got coffee in it, so I'd rather not use it, but let's just use something else. Right. And there we are. We're set up again. And I've got some special stuff. I mean, like you've got special stuff. I've got my own personal communion set, which I take around whenever I'm going around to bring communion to people who are housebound. And I've got a special one, which I use for special occasions for me, because this was specially made for me in Jerusalem. And
can I just mention that, because that's the one that brought me out in the cold sweat, because some years ago, can I press that?
yeah,
I was Doug's chalice assistant at our old church, and the lady was at the altar rail, and please God forgive me for saying this, but she had